Dear all, a very warm welcome to the Havels Insignia Presents edX, a series by Realty Plus Masterclass. Friends, edX Talks is a unique initiative dedicated to facilitate the development of an ecosystem for world-class designers in India. The one-of-a-kind architecture and design talk show aims to enable the process of collaboration with the best in the industry so as to position architects, designers, and manufacturers as partners offering complete solutions. I'm Sapna Srivastava, editor Realty Plus magazine, and let's begin with a brief introduction of Realty Plus.
Some people are born to show the world which path to choose in a crisis. Some brands are born to do the same. And during the times of challenge, the stalwarts of Indian real estate industry have chosen to do just that by showing others the way to finding opportunities even amidst a crisis. By showing the world how to go about delivering on promises even amidst adversity. Success doesn't just happen, it happens by design, by pushing the boundaries, by raising the bar. It's days of creating a vision and nights of bringing it to life. Knowing that pictures are worth 1,000 words and every word makes a difference. It's doing the research, trusting your instinct and finishing what you started. For the past 17 years, Realty Plus has been turning obstacles into opportunities, keeping the industry informed on the latest developments. Innovating to inspire debate and discussion. Bringing forth the perspectives of industry leaders. Honoring hard work and achievement. Keeping the industry connected. This is what we are built on. This is what we are building. We are Realty Plus and we lead the way.
This was a brief snippet of what Realty Plus is, its products and its initiatives. To know more about Realty Plus, do get in touch with Ms. Tripti Kedia, publisher and business head at Realty Plus at tripti@exchangeformedia.com. And now, moving on to the program of the day, I welcome Mr. Vivek Yadav, Senior Vice President, Havels India Limited, to please share his views on this edX series presented by Havels Insignia. Let me give a brief introduction of Mr. Yadav. He's an industry veteran with over 31 years of experience in electrical and automation, having worked in all domains from residential, commercial, industrial, and infrastructure. He has extensive experience in products and solutions from circuit protections in low voltage and medium voltage to automation in industries and homes. Mr. Yadav is currently heading Havels domestic circuit protection, electric wiring accessories, and home automation business, along with projects and enterprise business, which cuts across all business verticals in Havels. Mr. Yadav, I hand it over to you now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sapna. And, it's my pleasure to be here on this platform with Sonali Bhagwati, and you would hear about her very soon. I want to tell you more about, what this edX series is and the larger program under which we are driving this platform, which is called the Havels Insignia program. But before that, when I speak about it for a few minutes, before that, I want you to see a video of Havells. And why it is important to see a video of Havells is because the depth and the width of what we do in terms of offering products and various services, including our manufacturing, would be visible in this video. So please have a look at this video and appreciate what Havells is today in terms of what we offer to a wide variety of customers. So please play the video, please.
For more than 6 decades, Havells India Limited has been focusing on building a better future. A future where technology is used to drive progress, improve business outcomes, and create a better quality of life. Today, Havells stands tall in the FMEG sector as a major power distribution equipment manufacturer with a strong global footprint, owing to its innovative future-ready products for a wide spectrum of applications. With the acquisition of Lloyd in 2017, Havells has made a foray into high-potential consumer durable segment with offerings of air conditioners, LED televisions, washing machines, refrigerators and dishwashers. The new synergy further complements the brand's deeper into homes vision. Havells owns some of the most prestigious global brands like Crabtree, Lloyd, Standard and Rio. Its global network constitutes over 5,000 professionals across its offices. As part of its Make in India philosophy, Havells is manufacturing 97% of its products in-house. With 14 state-of-the-art, fully automated manufacturing plants located across India, Havells offers superior quality and globally benchmarked products to its customers. Havells has set up a large distribution network to set new benchmarks in prompt delivery and service to customers. Over 11,000 dealers, 150,000 retailers and 700 plus Havells Galaxy exclusive brand showrooms across the country are helping customers to choose from its wide range of products. Havells has a robust supply chain management system with 31 warehouses located pan-India. The meticulous forecasting and demand planning delivers seamless tracking system. Havells is the first FMEG company to offer doorstep service, offering a seamless post-purchase. It has the largest service network with 800 plus service points covering 441 towns 24/7 across India. Havells Center for Research and Innovation, CRI, at Noida, with a team of highly qualified engineers and designers, continuously work towards creating differentiated and innovative products while adhering to stringent quality norms at par with international standards. Havells products are certified by nationally accredited laboratories such as CPRI and ERDA. Havells has a strong in-house IT vertical which develops innovative technology platforms to support its robust service and supply chain management system. Growing together is ingrained in the ethos of Havells and has resulted in it launching many innovative and profitable schemes for its dealer community. Havells has strong credentials in B2B and large government projects as well, such as lighting up Kolkata railway station and partnering with NBCC India Limited to beautify and transform the night view of India's heritage monuments like Humayun's tomb, as it believes in the philosophy of spearheading the progress of the nation without ignoring the past. Havells has taken giant strides to create an innovative world full of possibilities, not only for itself, but also for all its channel partners and customers, with a commitment to improve people's lives and help create a better global society. Havells is inspiring the world and making a difference.
Okay, so as you would have seen in the video, the width and depth of the products and solutions that we offer, they transcend from homes, going to infrastructure and going to industries and covering all types of buildings. So I know you would have also seen the manufacturing strength, the service, the design infrastructure, the R&D infrastructure that we have. So with this, it became imperative that we engage, that we interact with the specifier community. And for that, we tried to create a program which is called the Havells Insignia Program. And what is this program? It's about interacting with the specifiers, engaging with specifiers, and with them under a framework which we call as 4I framework, incubate, generate new ideas, interact with them, share knowledge, create a linked community, and influence. Influence means, in terms of setting trends, in terms of publishing papers, maybe some yearbooks, and create a competitive environment for innovative designs. So under this 4I framework, we have several programs. The first program that we started was edX. So today we are into the 6th episode, where we have our renowned and very well-known speaker coming on stage. And before that, we've had some international designers also in this series. So this series, again, as Sapna initially elaborated, it's a unique initiative which is dedicated to facilitating the development of an ecosystem of world-class designers who will come on this platform, share their expertise, share their renowned works with, again, a community which will get linked to this program, this webinar. Today, it's being attended by a lot of such designers, and also the other partners in this ecosystem who would be executing such projects. The next could be under a different I that I mentioned, the 4 I's, could be, let's say, a yearbook. The yearbook would highlight, cutting edge design ideas, innovative viewpoints, which would also set the agenda for the themes and designs for that year. We would also include globally benchmarked works by leading specifiers across the globe. And this yearbook would become an ideal reference point for budding architects and interior designers. White papers I mentioned. So white papers would be to educate audience, to bring to light a new or different perspective, and also delve deeper into issues, trends, and policies which would be related to residential and commercial infrastructure, and also highlight causes that experts feel very strongly about and deep dive into their implications and benefits. We would create contests. It could be, redesigning a city, redesigning a monument, and invite, again, national and international level designers who could come and participate in this. Also, the last in this would be an award for the best design, for recognizing the best amongst the best. So that's what the overall Havells Insignia program would be. And as I said, edX is 1 I out of those 4 I's. So we'll take this program forward today, and I would hand it over back to Sapna to take the program forward. And this important episode where we have one of the most renowned architect amongst us. Looking forward to this. Sapna, please.
Yes, we are all looking forward to it. Thanks, Mr. Yadav, for sharing that brief on various Havells initiatives that you just mentioned under the 4 I's, including this very, first of its kind design talk show series that, we have today. And thanks for setting the tone of the day. And now let's bring on stage, as we are all awaiting the star of the day. Joining us is architect Sonali Bhagwati, President Design Plus Architecture Private Limited. Let me give a brief introduction of our speaker. Ms. Bhagwati graduated with a degree in architecture from CEPT Ahmedabad and has trained with architect Bernard Cohn as recipient of scholarship from Le Institut Français d'Architecture. She has been a member of the Delhi Conservation Society and is the member of Delhi Urban Heritage Foundation. She has served 2 successful terms as a member of Delhi Urban Arts Commission and has served on a committee of experts by Ministry of Environment to evaluate mining in the Aravalli Hills. She has been published as one of the 20 best architects of India and named as one of the top 12 interior architects in the country. So we have with us today Ms. Sonali Bhagwati. Ms. Bhagwati, thanks for being here today with us, and let me hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Sapna. Thank you, Havels, for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure. And I think it's wonderful, this initiative where you bring forth these topics which are so relevant to all of us. It's not only for architects and designers, but I think it's for community at large that these kind of topics have a lot of relevance. And I really congratulate you for putting forward these initiatives. I think when I saw the topics, I thought to myself that I am an architect, I'm a designer, I am not an engineer. So numbers and figures and pie charts and bar charts are really not my scene. I look at livable spaces, which is what it's all around us. We all create habitat to live in. That's what human beings require. So when we talk of habitat, we talk of livable spaces, we talk of built environment, it is something that I look at from a design perspective. How does a designer, what role does a designer play in understanding what is around you and imbibing everything that is around you to create a livable space? And I feel that the moment a space is livable and it is well thought through, it by default becomes a smart space. Adding technology is bringing it to another level. And that can be done with the help of a lot of, engineering and other things. But the base comes from design. And without a sound base, no technology is going to really work. So I feel that as a designer, the best thing we are most well equipped to create the foundation of what we call good livable spaces. Can we have the presentation? Okay, so I'm saying that what is really a smart livable space? According to me, a smart livable space needs a lot of learning from the past. First, we talk of the environment. That comes first because we live on Mother Earth. That's our habitat. That's our natural habitat. So environment is the first quotient, I would say. The second quotient is the human being. So it's for these two things coming together that calls for the entire topic of discussion. And hence, human-centric environment is exactly what we are talking about. So that is really every built environment that we are talking about today is meant for human beings and has to be human-centric. According to me, technology has to be there for human beings, not human beings for technology. Technology has to be there for the human-centric built environment and not creating an environment for technology. For me, it's the first basic that counts. And the first basic is got its roots from the past. Next. Let's talk of vernacular architecture. I mean, vernacular architecture has so much to teach us. It may be relevant today, it may not be directly relevant today, but I think the learnings from vernacular architecture are how did a civilization, how did a society respond at the particular time when this building was built. So architecture is really, it is a manifestation of the state of a society how evolved it is, how civilized it is, and how technologically sound it is. So whatever architecture that we see will always tell the story of the society of that time. If you see this, the Havelis of Rajasthan, you will see that stone was something that was in abundance around there. And they used this natural material, which is all around them, and they used it as a response to the hot and arid climate that they had. And they started creating fretwork. They started creating jalis that shaded them, that gave them filtered light. So it was a very clever response to a hot and arid climate with a local material. There was no transportation cost, there was nothing. So this is something which becomes a source of learning. No matter what the situation may be today or even 50 years from now, the hot arid climate will remain and the stone will remain. So these are the things which will never change. It is only how we respond to them will change. Next. Now, if you see a pole house in Gujarat, the way they created the verandas, creating these verandas was a direct, it was a social response. The way the facades were carved, because the wood was found in abundance around there. Wood is a soft material to carve. They could create, and it's a structural material. So they created the structures out of wood, they embellished it, and they created from a climactic and a social response, the verandas that was part of every household in a pole. They would have a swing out there, the family would sit out there in the evening, and it would be a very seamless community interaction. Next. This is a courtyard house. Now, courtyards were another very integral part of our vernacular architecture. Our climate in this country gave rise to a courtyard concept where all the openings were going to be towards the inside of the house and not towards the outside. The courtyard would have water, it would have natural cooling, the verandas would go around it, and it would create the air movement that was so necessary in the part of the country where this was built. So again, a direct response, terracotta tiles on the roof, they gave a cooling aspect, you know. So all these responses to the 3 or 4 basic issues, which was climate, local materials, and social interaction. So these 2 or 3 issues were the main governing points which gave rise to the typology of these vernacular buildings. Next. Again, a smaller courtyard house with greenery. Next. If you see the way the structure is, the way the columns are, the combination of wood and stone. So these are the kind of things, you know, they understood a material and they used it to its full potential. They created magic out of the material that was locally available. They used colors, they used everything that was around them to create really magical and very, very livable spaces. Next. When we start looking at our old cities, the urban structure, it was always very, very compact. The old Indian cities, in terms of planning, they had very narrow streets, and the buildings and the built structures were very tightly packed, and each of them opened inwards into a courtyard. So the tight, compact building placement actually manage to give shade to each other and shield the walls from direct heating from the sun, and help keep the entire what we call the passive cooling system, and help bring down the temperature. The courtyards with water created passive cooling, and it became a very, very environmentally sound and sustainable model of urban fabric. The compact development, dwelling density, internal and external connectivity, open spaces, walkable neighborhoods, access to social services, collective cohesiveness, local area governance, crime and safety, economic diversification, and socio-cultural diversity. All these features came together in a way that made these areas, these old cities, these communities extremely livable. And in itself, very smart, because every aspect of life was actually addressed and taken care of. Next. The elements of smart urbanism, what we gain from this is compactness, which means it improves walkability, it reduces energy usage, increased social interaction, access to community services, mutual shading, and reduced travel demand. The density, the higher density, is viable interactions between urban functions and activities, compact development, efficient use of natural resources, and it discourages automobile ownership. The mobility, it reduces travel, the need to travel, because everything is much more packed together. Accessibility is very good, environment and pedestrian friendly. And it is, I would say, anti-motorized vehicular growth. Land use mix, because it always, I mean, today we talk of mixed land use in these larger projects that we do, because after all these years of learning, we have come back to the basic. What our old cities had was mixed land use. You had a shop at the bottom, you had a house at the top or a house behind, you had an educational institute close by, you had different, so you had all your necessities in a very tight and a very small radius. So this mixed land use is a model that we have learned from the past again. So this ensures safety on streets, increases accessibility, attractive local streets are created, it boosts local creative economy, and high neighborhood charm. So mixed land use is a very, very, sort of an important aspect of, it was a very important aspect of creating a very livable neighborhood. Next. Diversity. So, because there was a mixed neighborhood, there was rich social and cultural mix. It promoted walking. It was very closely grained, and it created very, very interesting urban landscapes. Passive solar design. So, it favored microclimatic conditions. It reduced cooling and heating loads. It was environmentally very viable, and it promoted local craft skills. And in the end, it was, we call the green urbanism. So, all these issues that we have, we are these, what I would call the factors of I would say the denominators of our old cities, our livable environment. And I think when we take these today and we sort of purpose them into today's situation, they yield very, very rich design results. So understanding and imbibing these as we go forward becomes a very, very important part of our new developments. Next. what happened to our old cities? Now just talking back, going back to the old cities, what it was built on, the principles it was built on, we just saw. But today, there is a complete breakdown and there is a chaos in these old cities due to the factors which are, increase where things have not been managed. There have been no controls. So there is increased commercialization. Like if you take the example of Old Delhi, in 1870s, a large part of the old city was demolished to bring in the railways. Now, the old city was really never designed to take a railway. It was not a concept that existed when the old city was designed. So when you bring in a railway, which is a very, very different form of transport and a different quality of transport, it brought with it lots of wholesale goods. And when those goods got off the train, they needed space. And the old city, which was really not designed for it, became something what you see over here, because a completely alien concept was suddenly thrust into it. When the darbars happened, large roads were opened up and vehicular transport for the first time was introduced in the old city. Now, because of that, suddenly there is again a mobility part starts playing an important role, and a lot of outside things started coming in. This is what started causing all the chaos and breakdown of the infrastructure. Next. Now, that's what started happening, building technology. Earlier, mainly all the buildings were ground plus one, very ground hugging. Today, due to all the different evolutions in building technology, we have gone higher. We have gone 7 floors, 8 floors in the old city, which was not meant to be that high. The space was not designed to take those densities. There is complete lack of urban control. Earlier, the urban controls came from a cohesive community. Today, there is no cohesive community because there are complete outside forces. And because of that, there is a complete breakdown of the urban structure, which you see over here. Next. So we said that what happens if you want to take some of our old cities and you want to make them livable again? What do we do? How do we make people like us who do not live or who have nothing more to do with the old city technically? How do you encourage people to go back to the old city? How do you encourage people to go and relive your heritage, to appreciate your heritage and not just sort of look at it as a place that you never want to go to? So we said, let's pick up Shahjahanabad, which is Old Delhi, and let's see what we can do to somehow restore some part of its glory, to bring the walkability back into the city, how to create these walking loops, And if you want people to walk, you have to give them an experience. You have to take them back to what the old glory used to be. So we decided to examine a few streets and see what were the things that were really causing problems. So we said, okay, one of the things that we was, there was all sorts of services that were happening. Then there was haphazard signage, uncontrolled facade finishes, temporary structures, lack of facade controls and shop fronts, encroachments. There was no defined pavements. There was no definition of no proper lighting, no hawking zones. So these are all the essentials of any urban scape, which were completely missing. Next. So we said, let's try something. Let's see what we can do. So we said that let's look at a few steps, very, very simple few steps to do, where we can start adhering to a material palette, a color palette, restore some of the architecture, get a uniform signage system in, restructure the roads, define the pavements, bring in lighting, bring in street furniture, define where the parking should be, re-pedestrianize some of the streets, and look how it becomes, it just becomes a different place. And this is what we need to aspire. This is what I would say, re-smartening the place. It used to be a wonderful place. It has gone down. Let's see how we can make it into a nice, livable, smart, livable habitat again. Next. We took another street. This is, Kinari Bazaar, which is going towards Town Hall. So this is again another typical street, very commercial, with all sorts of, vehicles going through. There is no control whatsoever. And again, the problems were the same. So we said, okay, what can we do? So we tried a little work on this, a little photo montage to see what can happen. And next. And this is what can happen. A little bit of material control, a little bit of color palettes that you determine, restoring the old elements. A lot of the old elements exist. We just need to bring them back, make them vehicular free, create proper zones, bring in the lighting, bring in the signage, and it just becomes a different space altogether. And this is completely non-invasive and extremely doable. So this is what I feel is re-smartening our neighborhoods. Next. This was a small Kinari Bazaar, a small street. And you can see it's actually very beautiful because it has all these beautiful tinsels and all sorts of gota, kinari, all these things lined all across the road, So it's visually very, very exciting. But the visual excitement just completely gets taken away because of all the chaos and the services and the wires and, everything happening all over the place. Next. And look how it can become, just a little bit of smartening up, little bit of controls, a little bit of, street lightings, a little bit of defining the walkways, and it becomes a new area. Next. This is one of the residential areas. It is indeed an extremely nice area with these beautiful doors, lovely cast iron columns, lovely balconies. And it's just getting lost with the, this full network of cables and wires and pipes and, all sorts of things happening. Next. And see what it can look like, It just, you bring out the beauty of this lovely Kucha Patiram. Next. This is another very small gully, where again we found some beautiful, old elements still very, very intact. And we thought we could really restore this area. And next. And see how it becomes, it's still the same space. It's just completely cleaned up. It's just, you put a little bit of artwork, you put a little bit of paint, you put a little bit of restoration, and just organize your lighting, organize your signage, and it's a new space. Next. And these are the kind of facades that we can recreate, on these streets. And this would really bring back a lot of value to the old city and rejuvenate. And I believe that when people make money, anything that you do becomes successful. So if it increases footfalls, people come in, this becomes socially active, it becomes economically active. You have waste management, you have proper sanitation. It just becomes like any old city in the world, which has great value. Next. This is one of those internal courtyards, which is completely taken over as a go-down space. lovely big doors which are completely stained and not visible at all. Lovely nice columns, and nothing of this comes to light when you first see the space, because it's only the chaos and the warehousing that takes over your visual, your eye. Next. And look what it can become. It's the same courtyard. It's the same elements. It's just completely cleaned up. Just a little bit of reflooring, a little bit of furniture, and it can become a lovely little cafe. So idea is that with a little intervention and a little planning and a little community participation, we can look at recreating very smart, livable spaces within our old city again. Next. Then on top of that, to make it go further, we can look at roof-mounted solar panels, rainwater harvesting, solar charged LV outlets, introduction of horticulture. Next. Wi-Fi, universal access. This is something which is so greatly lacking in our cities or in all our built environment. We have no consideration for the physically challenged or the elderly. You need to be young and agile to traverse our cities, and that is really not acceptable. So universal access is very important. Bilingual and braille signages, SOS call boxes, CCTV cameras. These are what I call the digital smartness, which can enhance the living spaces that you have created and take it to the next level. That can bring it to the level that you expect any modern city to be. Next. So these are, I would say, some of the learnings that I look at as how do you sort of go back to making smart and livable habitats. So the learnings from the past, the parameters that we feel made our old cities successful can be very easily learned and imbibed into our newer environments. So one is recreating smart old cities, rejuvenating them. And second is to learning from there to create new contemporary environments and new contemporary livable habitat, So if we understand our past, I think it equips us very well to build for the future. So I'm going to talk about two schools, which are, I would say, an attempt at sort of using the learning from the past into a present context. The first is this Vidya Gyan School, which is a residential school created for the economically weaker sections by the Shiv Nadar Foundation, which is outside Delhi, outside Noida in UP. And the second one is Thapar University, which is an old university, but about 4 or 5 years ago, they decided to go in for a very, very large expansion program. And we came in and we looked at doing this expansion where we look at as an extremely avant-garde, forward-looking architecture, but it actually imbibes the spirit of everything that we have from the past. Next. So this is a Vidya Gyan School. We had looked at, courtyards, we had looked at pergolas, deep verandas, use of all local bricks. So idea was to use materials which were locally available. UP brick is very good. So everything was in exposed brickwork. There were brick jalis because of the harsh sun, because everything was to do with passive cooling. There was extensive amount of horticulture. Courtyards were created, little seating places. So it was a school that was created for the economically weaker section, but it had all the attributes to keep it very interesting, very lively, and very earthy, which, can you go back? Which actually gave the people, the kids who go to school over there, a great sense of belonging. They did not feel alien over there. And that was most important, because any habitat, any space must make the user feel very, very comfortable, because that's the first principle of smartness. Okay, this is the Thapar University. So we decided to look at the red stone. That is what North India is so sort of synonymous with. Agra stone as the basic visual sort of, how should I say, visual connection to this as a design language. So we looked at creating, so there were a couple of things. There was the climate. How do you make a place work well, where basically you want to use passive cooling, you want to keep it very low energy and make it very comfortable. So there was a couple of blocks in this. There was the learning center, there is a boys hostel, there's a girls hostel. So this is a part of the boys hostel. And what was important to know over here is that we decided to take a design language where we created a very, very high podium. The podium is about 9 meters high, and the undercroft becomes a very, very active space. It's a full public space which functions very well during all the hot months. And the top of the podium becomes very beautiful plazas in the wonderful winter months of Patiala. So Punjab has a very nice winter as well. So the above and the lower parts of the podium become the two weather sort of responses, you know, the winter side and the summer side. Next. So if you see over here, this is where your undercroft is. You have all these spaces happening at the bottom. And then you have the other blocks that are going above are all in the red sandstone. They are actually in GRC, but they are sort of imbibing the look of the red sandstone. And a lot of it is just sandstone jali work. So a lot of the glass, which is on top, which is going to have direct sun, is protected by the jali that is made with the red sandstone. So it is red sandstone and concrete. So this is how it becomes. So the shaded areas at the lower level become very, very interesting, very active. They have the cafes opening up, the kids study. It's like a very, very vibrant space now that the university is functional. So this is how the undercroft comes, you know, and they have seating spaces, they have open gyms, and the upper areas are all completely protected and with the jali work, giving it the requisite shade and the privacy where required. So this is the way the buildings come together, the lower level and the upper level. And we have a lot of pergolas. So there is a lot of greenery now that has come up, and all these lower areas with the water becomes very, very comfortable in the summer months. And we see children hanging around here all the time, even through the summer months, except for barring 1 or 2 months when the summer holidays are there. All these spaces are very, very active. So this is the way the space feels. Next. So the lower area is like one whole separate interaction, and the upper areas get connected with all these bridges that and the podiums and the plazas that sort of tie up the various buildings. So this is how these lower areas are coming together, just a few pictures. And if you see over here, all these areas above have a lot of glass, but because of the jali, they all remain, they require much, much lesser air conditioning loads. And it's a very energy efficient building. And this is how it looks from inside. And this is the top plazas. So the winter months, these are the plazas that get active, and this got children all over the place over here. So these are the top plazas. So here you see the lower area and the upper area in the background and the lower area in the foreground. And then, of course, we have these large cutouts through which you can look inside and the glass opens up. And the jalis, which are the most important feature. So the way Rajasthan stonework jalis came about, this is an attempt to imbibe the jalis of the modern day. Also, we found that, these jalis were extremely useful, even in the boys' hostel, because in all the hostel rooms, we have a veranda. And a lot of the children, they have, you have laundry hanging and you have all sorts of things hanging. And these facades look really, really bad after a while because it's very difficult to control. But because of the skin that we've put on, the facades remain so controlled, and it gives full privacy to the balconies so that even the children are not really embarrassed to put their things out. And it just makes, it makes sure that you have the same look of the building at any time of the day or year. So if you see, this is a very high plinth that is created, and the jalis that go all the way up over here. And this is how the rooms look out into the balconies. And monumental steps that sort of connect the lower and the upper level. And even the building blocks are not like standard building blocks where basically we find, it's like one block after another. These blocks are also very, very well modulated. And what we achieved very successfully over here is that each hostel block, the rooms are around a sort of a central space. It is not accessed through a corridor. They're all single loaded corridors, or they are accessed through a common area. And the common areas are staggered on different floors, giving it into a double height or a triple height space, and increasing the visual connectivity from a lower area to an upper area to the next area. So the visual complexity that gets created inside due to these staggered spaces makes it very active, socially interesting, and very, very, as an architectural space, very exciting. Next. So this is how the facade becomes, it gets lit from inside in the evening. Next. So this is the learning center. So the learning center itself also, if you see what one has tried to do, if you remember what I was showing you, the columns of the Chettinad homes, the way, the forms of our vernacular architecture, the beauty of those forms, we have tried to look at that. Today, ideally, people start creating building blocks. They are just sort of blocks of A, B, C, D, whatever. But here, we've tried to modulate a block. If you see, the lines are not straight, they are modulated. There is a lot of emphasis on volumes and the quality of space that is created. So it is a very dynamic space. It's not at all static. As you move, the space changes with you. The lighting is looked into very, very carefully. They are very well lit. And idea is to create this great spatial complexity, which makes it extremely exciting at any time, and it doesn't bore you when you come into the space. Next. And if you see over here, so, the way we have modulated the ceilings, the slabs, the way they're crossing each other, the larger double height spaces that get created. So there is a lot of play of angles and forms. So it's almost, I would say, like a sculpture. So it's like when you start making a study model, you start turning and twisting forms. This is like that. So this is literally like sculpting a block of a space out of a block. Next. Next. So this is really the quality of space that you're getting, the library area. So you have a large staircase going up on one side, you have, and then, this creates a nice sort of a central space where everyone comes together, everyone looks into it. It's like the town square, So a lot of the learnings of our old cities, the way we lived, the way things were, the kind of excitement that got created due to the organic nature of things has been brought back into a contemporary form over here. Next. So this is the library area. And this is the central area. So Thapar University has been actually selected, that this learning center has been selected as the best educational institute worldwide. And it has just won the award of being the best educational institute. So it's been a labor of love, but I think it's been a great learning curve for us. And I feel so good that we've managed to create something which is not only, it's a nice piece of architecture, but I think it goes back, it has its roots where it all began, and that's what I feel good about. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Bhagwati. I think you rightly mentioned we have now started using the word livable, but it was already there in our architecture, long time back. We had been making livable and smart cities. Mr. Yadav, you just saw the presentation and how we had been creating these compact cities for energy efficiency, for controlling the heat and the climate for the residents of that particular area or the region. In today's time, we are not that lucky to have sprawling complexes. We are living in apartments. We are living in high-rise buildings, tall buildings. So energy efficiency for architects has become a big challenge. So how are you looking at these solutions, the products that can be part of the buildings to provide similar kind of energy efficiency that we had seen in our older buildings?
The contrasting challenges when you look at existing cities and you want to redesign them. The examples that we saw in Sonali's presentation about the old city, the old Delhi side, and how it can be transformed in livable spaces. Of course, it has its own challenges. But those spaces also can become smart. That's how Sonali through her presentation brought it about. Not just living in those old cities, but how even life can be enhanced, the quality of life can be enhanced in those spaces. Contrasting to that is how we live in cities today in high-rise buildings. One statistics, if we look at the amount of energy which is guzzled by buildings, be it residential or commercial, it's 40% of the total energy produced is consumed by these buildings. And the big part of that energy goes into, one area, which is lighting, and the other area is air conditioning. So companies like ours, have solutions for lighting, which are definitely energy efficient. On top of that, you have controls with which you can minimize the use of lighting using daylight, natural daylight, using shade control, using occupancy sensing. So you can reduce the consumption there. So there are many more technologies where you can integrate with the integrated building management system and bring down the energy cost and reduce the carbon footprint. So this is just one example which I said. But when you use electricity, you have to make it safe, reliable, and efficient. Safe to use means you use switchgear, which is to make it safer, where the natural energy usage of the switchgear has to be reduced. Okay, so there companies like us play a part. So there are many other areas apart from the basic hygiene that we can give to buildings, hygiene products that we can give to building. Hygiene, I don't mean by the actual hygiene, but the basic products that we can give to not just these new buildings, but even old buildings. How you can refurbish the old structures. So this is, I think, my view of on the old part and the new part. I have a connecting question. Very interesting presentation, Sonali. Thank you so much for bringing out this facet of the old places in our cities. We can, being Delhiite, we can very easily correlate with the old Delhi area and how that has come about. I mean, I would want to ask you, what were the main challenges when you work on these kind of spaces, these streets, both residential as well as commercial? I mean, how do you deal with people who are already living there? How do you deal with the utilities? Because these two would definitely play a big part in transforming the areas and also doing these projects in time-bound manner. And also without disturbing the actual architecture, the visible architecture of those cities, of those places, of those buildings, havelis, houses, doors, jalis that you mentioned. I mean, how do you bring those about?
Vivek, what happens is that anywhere in the world, if you go, if you own a piece of heritage, you are fortunate. You take great deal of pride in it. You do not indiscriminately destroy it because there are controls in place. So first of all, we have to change from a base level, that this is a heritage precinct. Any old city. I mean, I'm talking about Delhi because I'm most familiar with it. And if you own a piece of your property over there, it is a piece of heritage, and it needs to abide by the laws which are laid down to protect it, enhance it, and take it forward from there. What can be done about it? What can't be done about it? So I think first of all, these baseline rules have to be laid out. It's a hard call. It's a hard bullet to bite. But unless you do that, you will remain a namby-pamby and nothing will happen. So you have to be able to take these calls and put your foot down and say, okay, one is not talking about demolishing anything. One is respecting that. But within that, at least respect what comes onto the street. So it is a minimal amount of invasion that one is talking about, which is only at the interface of the public and the private domain. That's all. And I think that's the least a landowner or a property owner is obliged to do, number one. The other things are all to do with utilities. Because of indiscriminate building and, no controls, people have done things all over the place. Idea is to consolidate. Anywhere in the world, you will see services are underground, tunnels are made, and things are worked out. There are simple standard solutions for this, engineering solutions. Idea is that you need to be able to do that. Number 3, you have to prioritize your accessibility and try and work out a pattern where vehicular movement is restricted to certain zones. You go to Geneva, when you go to the old city, you may be an extremely wealthy person with this apartment, which costs maybe €1 million in the old city, but you still have to walk there because you are proud to be in that old city, you know. You are at an advantage. I mean, you are actually fortunate to be there. And that is what has to come out. If you have a place facing Jama Masjid, what better can you have? So we have to sort of reinvent our basic concepts and then take a few hard calls. And we are looking at only the utilities. We are not looking at demolishing or changing a private domain, which is already there. It's the interface that we are looking at. So I think with a little bit of effort, I mean, if they could build Sabarmati, the riverfront, they can do this for sure.
That is
I
true.
don't think it's such a big challenge.
I think it all starts from taking pride in your heritage. So
Yes,
once
you
we start
have to be
feeling
proud
that,
of it. Yeah.
so it will automatically come to that. So, but as you know, taking a cue from the question that I mentioned to Vivek, do you think technology, as you mentioned, that we have all sorts of technology, we have all sorts of solutions, it's just the right application of them. Do you think technology is an enabler when we are talking about sustainability in the modern context, when we are talking about human centricity in modern context? Is technology an enabler?
Of course, technology is an enabler, but I always feel that technology has to enable good living. Good living doesn't have to follow technology. So technology is for human beings. And technology has to be brought in as it works best for a particular situation. I mean, if you go to, let's say, hypothetically speaking, Old Delhi, and you put in a glass building over there and try and make it green, that's out of context technology, you know. So I mean that technology has to be for the right thing. And yes, for the right thing, it is a great enabler.
Right. So, we come back to right application and the right context of, using the technology. Now we are all talking about work from home. Everyone is now, because of the last 1 year of pandemic. Going forward, what reinventions do you envisage in, residential segment or the commercial segment because of the work from home? The change is the constant, the only constant, as we say. Design wise, how do you see work from home changing our residential and our commercial spaces?
You know, I've done a lot of research on this, and there were 2 or 3 things that emerged. One is that people who have good homes, it's very romantic to say work from home and all that, okay? Because you have the space to work from home. But don't forget, at least 50% of the workforce that go to a normal office are not so fortunate to have dedicated work from home spaces. There are people who come from small towns. There are 2 people to a room sharing a space, people share apartments. So it is not as rosy and hunky-dory as it is made out to be, okay? Also, for a lot of people, getting dressed and going to office is a great thing to look forward to. Going to office is a social event as well, So let's not forget that we human beings are inherently social beings, and we require that social interaction. But how, at the same time, one of the things that has come about is that a lot of people would travel 1 to 2 hours a day to go to work and back. So a lot of time and energy was wasted only in commuting. So definitely one of the learnings is that is something that we can reduce. We cannot stop, but we can reduce. We could look at creating, this is something which I feel very strongly about, create what I call the 24/7s of workspaces. You know, like how we have the 24/7 stores. You create 24/7 workspaces, which are work pods. They're small spaces, they are neighborhood spaces. They are like your 24/7s in your neighborhood. You walk 100 meters and you can come to a 24/7. Similarly, you walk 100 meters and you should be able to come to a work pod. And you should be able to swipe your card, log in, become a member, use a desk with Wi-Fi connectivity, and it's a 24/7. So it's a co-working shared space, but not like the WeWorks. It is a co-working at a community level.
Correct.
You know, so let's say 3 days a week, somebody can still log in, sit at a desk and work peacefully with full connectivity, with full access to all the Wi-Fi and everything, and not spend 2 hours commuting to work, to a main office. Twice a week, you may still go there, but other 3 days, you could still work out and still retain the formality of working, still have the social interaction. And the main offices become more as teamwork spaces, you know, not so much as the standard workspaces that we always took them to be. So I think the model of workspace could change, the way people work could change. And I think it could give rise to some very exciting new models.
That's true. I think we Indians are very enterprising, and we might soon come at, as you mentioned, community level work pods, very affordable for anyone. Just hire it for a day or, and work out of that. Vivek Yadav, what do you have to say about such a concept happening, and how as a solution provider, actually you're looking at work from home, how customers are coming to you for their IT solutions, especially when they're working from home?
So, the pandemic has actually opened up a lot of opportunities for a company like ours. We've been able to, see a rising trend of demand for, products which will make life easier for working professionals at homes. In the pandemic, touching surfaces has become a taboo almost. So how do you make those surfaces either, touchless? I mean, the gadgets touchless, operating those gadgets touchless is one thing. The other is that if there are, surfaces which definitely would be touched, something like operating a switch. So how does, with the use of good materials, how do you make them, surfaces which do not transmit virus? Okay, when the virus comes in contact there and it doesn't multiply and then it dies. So some of these, habits and some of these, I would say, necessities which have become very pertinent today in the current context, has given opportunities for companies like us to introduce new product categories, introduce products which are suitable for customers, and we've been able to address those needs of consumers. My view on this is that work from home as a concept will not die. Okay, it will not be the same what it used to be before the pandemic. People would start going back to office, and I very much agree with Sonali when she says that people look forward to the event. It's going to office is not just going to office to work. It's getting ready in the morning. That morning routine is very important for the emotional well-being of people. You can be in house for few days, few weeks, and if we are forced maybe for months, but look at what it is doing to the mental health of people. So, but the other side, if you see that if the life has to be balanced, so work from home definitely would be, some, I would say that, some portion or some amount of, people would be there who would, balance it out. Companies would have to allow this. There are a lot of companies who are forcing their employees to come back to office now. But if it is, customer facing, where customers have started coming, and if it's customer facing job, you have to do that. But if the job is that you manage projects online, then there is no need to come to office. There has to be a fine balance between both two, and I believe that both these models would coexist as we move forward.
That's right. I think hybrid model of working is here to say stay. Many developers are already providing business centers in their towers for the residents. So as you rightly said, work from home and other changes that we have seen, especially in the last 2 years, has transformed architecture, design, real estate development, product manufacturing, how solution providers are looking at solution. Sonali, as a designer, now, we have seen like what Vivek mentioned, contactless operations are going to be, part of our designs, our buildings. What are the challenges as a designer? You see challenges and opportunities now that we will see going forward when we are designing our buildings.
No, so I think there has been a big learning curve and a lot of things that one never probably considered earlier are definitely sort of taking front stage now. There is a great sort of awareness in many ways on your basics, like your proximity, your hygiene, and a lot of people are now paying a lot more attention to these things than what it was earlier. So that is, of course, I think one good step in that sense. Also, as I said, that, people not coming to, I mean, if you don't need to come to work or you don't need to attend a meeting in person, I mean, people have started accepting that. Earlier, it was a very common thing that even if you wanted to talk about one thing, you called everybody. People traveled half an hour, 1 hour from different parts of the city, came for a meeting, did a half an hour meeting, chatted for the next 1 hour and went back. Now today, if there is a meeting at 11, maximum by 11:05, people are online. You talk. By 11:30, you finished your talking, another 5 minutes, meeting is over and you're back to what you're doing. So there is a huge amount of awareness of time, sort of, utilizing your time properly and not wasting time on infructuous things. So, there are some of these things which have emerged, and I think at all levels, people are accepting it. I mean, people are accepting even site visits with video, so which was something quite unheard of earlier. I'll give you an example. There is this large development that we are doing in Udyog Vihar. It's like 6 towers. We used to, our teams used to go to New York once a month for meetings with the developer. It was such a strain to go all the way to the US for 3 days, 4 days, once a month. Also huge expense. It's a waste of energy at all levels, besides the money and time. Today, because of the pandemic, everybody was forced to go on Zoom, and people have realized that the same thing can be done on Zoom almost as easily. So now probably those meetings will happen, but once in 6 months. So I think these are the good things that have emerged out of the pandemic.
Okay, that's great. So these are some of the ways that probably the design community has changed in terms of interaction with clients, in terms of interaction with stakeholders, and probably in terms of within your team members. I think the biggest advantage or benefit has been the carbon footprint now, because of the entire travel, as you mentioned, flying every month. So the reduction in carbon footprint. Now, coming back to the last question, Vivek, do you think IoT connected buildings are the future now? Now that the way we are looking at everyone on, Wi-Fi and everyone on connected devices?
I think that's going to be the norm as you go in future.
It's a default thing now.
Connected technology is going to be there, all pervasive everywhere. The appliances that we use at home, they are going to get connected, not just for the ease of use, but also for the manufacturers to do proactive diagnosis, giving the customers the service just in time when the product is is about to go through a cycle where parts need to be changed, and if there are serviceable parts, they can be changed in time without the stoppage of service. So that's one example, just one example I gave. But be it home or be it a large commercial building, they will all be communicable. When I say communicable, means for the people who will use those premises, people who will manage and maintain those premises, and for the service providers who are going to be being associated with the services being provided in those buildings. They will all be connected. So that's the future. And when all these buildings will exist in a city, the city will be smart. So that's what the the smart city concept is. So connected buildings, connected products, connected appliances, connected gadgets is going to be the norm as we move on. And that's the reason why companies like ours, even if we are creating small products of day-to-day needs, which were traditional products, dumb products, they're also becoming intelligent and smart. I mean, just for an example is a simple fan, a simple lighting in homes, a downlighter that you use, a normal bulb that you use. They're all getting connected. Today, we may not find many use cases because we are not able to visualize. But as people start to use, they will develop their own use cases for these connected devices. So future is connected world. It's moving very, very fast, I would say. And I foresee that a few years time, at least in cities, there will be a lot of connected homes. There will be a lot of connected buildings. And of course, the smart city concept, which the government is driving, is the right step in that direction.
That's right. Pandemic has been a great accelerator of technology in our everyday lives. Sonali, like Vivek mentioned, that connected devices, connected appliances is going to be the future. How do you see designs getting impacted? As you mentioned, design is the foundation, and over that you build with technology as an enabler, as a add-on value. How do you see the designs getting influenced by so much of technology in our everyday lives?
The moment we start having products which can talk, I mean, when I say connected, they are able to talk to each other.
Right.
The moment that starts happening, it starts making things very seamless. So where in design one would have looked at compartmentalization or a certain approach, those sort of boundaries start blurring. And things start becoming a lot more, continuous, seamless, merging from one into another. So definitely it would have an impact on design. Like, for example, till some time ago, if one is looking at a home with certain kind of fenestration, now with the kind of connectivity that we have and security systems that we can put in, one doesn't have to worry about many things that we would have looked at in the facade, let's say. So yes, it has impacted the design and it has taken it to another level. Similarly, internal spaces, lighting, the way your lighting comes on, the way it senses the ambient lighting, it comes on, goes down, controlled. These things, we would not have done the kind of facade lighting that we do now if it was not connected, if it was not able to function the way it is functioning today, So yes, the end product in a design definitely is moving alongside the technology that is coming in.
Okay, fantastic. So as our speakers mentioned, that technology is influencing design, but still design remains the basis of whatever we create. If we are talking about livable and smart city, and as Sonali said, the boundaries are merging now. So there is a fading of boundaries between compartmentalization of what designers actually. We are seeing now living spaces being used as offices now. Bedrooms being used for multifunctional purposes, so that's happening. So that was great talking to both our speakers, and thanks for taking those questions from our audience and those sharing those wonderful insights. We also have Mr. Remel Behel, head for enterprise business Havells India, here with us. He had been listening to the entire conversation. Remel, what is your take on this entire conversation and the presentation that we just saw?
Thank you, Sapna. What a fantastic presentation. And really, on behalf of Havells, it has been an honor and a privilege for me to be part of this conversation. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks to our honored guest, architect Sonali Bhagwati. Your emphasis on the good livable spaces and habitats, combining design with technology is so relevant in today's scenario. Your vast experience on the various award-winning projects which combine heritage, health, buildability, and science, helping to build a human-centric environment has really been enlightening. And each one of your projects, like the Thapar University or the Vidya Gyan School, are really unique and memorable architectural experiences in themselves. I personally liked your thoughts on the digital smartness, which is so important in today's scenario. We at Havells also understand and honor our past and use our learnings from the past. We imbibe the philosophy of working in a close collaboration with our clients and partners and stakeholders to together achieve a successful and sustainable outcome. So, today's session truly has been the merging of art, culture, and history with technology. So I would like to also thank all our honorable participants who have taken time out for participating in this edX series. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the organizing team. Thank you so much and have a great day ahead.
Thanks, Remel. Thanks so much for putting the right words. You would very efficiently summarize. I think the takeaway from today's session is have pride in your heritage. Let's maintain our heritage. It does not take too much. As we have seen the presentation, it's just little upliftment, and we have our heritage intact with us. Technology is going to be a big influencer on our designs, but design remains the foundation of all, and the technology is the value addition onto it. As Mr. Vivek Yadav said, connected world is the future. So on that note, thanks Mr. Behel for giving that thank you note on behalf of Realty Plus and Havells India. Thanks Mr. Vivek Yadav for being part of this session and sharing your views as a solution provider. I want once again thank our speaker of the day, architect Sonali Bhagwati, President Design Plus Architecture Private Limited, for sharing her knowledge with the design fraternity, for sharing her such valuable thoughts and inputs with our audience. And most of all, a sincere thanks to the awesome audience for being here and sharing their time and sending those wonderful questions which we put up to our speakers. So do keep watching this space as we bring to you yet another acclaimed design expert in the next episode. But till then, thank you and goodbye. Thanks, Ms. Sonali Bhagwati, once again.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Vivek.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.